There are lots of different ways to save money with buying food, and today I'm going to talk about 11 different ways of saving money buying food that you might not have heard of or you might not have thought of. G'day there, I'm Dana from Piwakaka Valley Homestead. With the way things are at the moment, a lot of people are struggling to find enough money for food, and I thought I might share some different ways that they're kind of counterintuitive to the way that we're often taught to save money with our food, but they're the ways that I use to keep our food budget much lower. I'm sorry if you hear growling in the background. The dogs are being quite frustrating, just playing right next to me and they won't go away. So, number one. And this is something that we are often told if we're budgeting for food to try and save money, is to always buy in bulk. But the reality is, often bulk isn't actually cheaper. I have found with our local supermarket that if you're buying rice by 1 kilo, that the per kilo rate is actually cheaper than buying the bigger bags in some of the brands. So it's actually worth checking the per kilo or per pound price if you're going to be buying larger amounts of food to make sure that it is actually cheaper. There is a sort of an economies of scale sort of thing happening where the more popular size is often actually the cheaper per kilo. So it's worth checking. And buying in bulk's not always the cheapest. And the other thing is, if you're buying in bulk, often some of the food will go to waste, especially like a flour or rice, those sorts of things. Grains can get contaminated. Can get contaminated, try saying that 3 times fast, by weevils. They can go mouldy, that sort of thing. So sometimes buying in bulk, it's just not worth doing. If you want to get some of the benefits of buying in bulk, sometimes the bulk bins are a good way to go. Often they have really good deals and you can pick food up there for the sort of bulk price, but you can buy smaller amounts of it. And this is really helpful if you're buying spices that you don't usually use, or that sort of thing, things that you just need a one-off smaller amount of. The other thing to be really wary of is the multi-buy things, especially on things like fresh produce. I'll often find at our local market that the broccoli is 2 for whatever, or buy 2 get 1 free, or that sort of thing. And the reality is my family will get through 1 head of broccoli in a week. So if I buy the 2 heads of broccoli and it costs slightly more than buying just 1 head of broccoli, the reality is that second head is likely to go to waste because we don't use it. And the extra money that I paid for it, yes, it was a cheap head of broccoli, but actually it's going to go to waste or the rabbits will eat it. Just be really aware if you're buying those sort of 2 for deals or whatever, that there's something that is not going to go off and that it will be eaten within its best before date. Number 3, that's also a little controversial, is don't keep a meal plan, or at least not a rigid meal plan. Meal plans are great for taking the stress out of knowing what you're going to be cooking for dinner, but the reality is it's not always the easiest way of making the most of specials, especially if they're clearance items. It can be really helpful if you keep it really broad, like on Mondays we have Mexican, Tuesdays are easy dinners, Wednesdays might be fried food, just keeping it nice and simple. And it means that it takes the planning pressure off a little bit, but still allows you to make the most of the specials that are around that week. And along with that as well is to embrace the leftovers. Leftovers in our house is often a Sunday night dinner, is all the leftovers of the week all get put together and it's a bit of a mishmash meal. Or we might do what's commonly known as bubble and squeak, or we called it hash magandi growing up, where some cold mashed potatoes thrown in with some onions, maybe some eggs and some cheese, and then all the leftover veggies, and they're all just fried in a pan. It makes a really tasty fried up Sunday night dinner, and it's a really good way of using up leftovers. Leftovers also make really good lunches the next day, or sometimes you can just manage to stretch a thing of meal into a whole nother dinner if you can kind of halve it when you're serving it up and know that the other half will do dinner tomorrow. Leftover soup is another really good thing. My friend will attest to this. One day when I can't remember if we were painting the house or moving house, one or the other, and I made a massive pot of soup, and it was just leftover soup. So it was all the stuff out of the fridge, there was random bits and bobs out of the freezer, and honestly it was the nicest soup we've ever had. So sometimes leftover soup is actually a really nice dinner to have. Another controversial idea is to actually shop more often, not less often. Often we're told to, shop once a fortnight if you want to save money. But I would say, especially if you're eating quite a fresh produce-based diet, which obviously is something that I would kind of recommend. It's a much more natural way of eating, but you're wanting to be eating that, especially vegetables, at their peak of goodness. So shopping a couple times a week and in smaller quantities will actually save you throwing out sort of your soggy whatevers at the end of the week. Especially if your family's like mine and won't eat soup. Another tip I have is to keep an eye out where they put the clearance items and the short dated stock. This is particularly if you eat lots of dairy. The short dated stuff is the stuff that's probably going to go off tomorrow. But if you get it home and you either cook with it or you can it or you freeze it, then that use by date no longer exists, because as soon as it's been cooked or frozen, the use by date is extended. So if it is due to expire as such tomorrow and you go home and put it straight in your freezer, that means that while it's in the freezer, it's perfectly fine. It just means when you get it out at the other end, you've got to use it within that 24 hours. So short dated stock is quite a common feature in my family's dinner or lunches. We'll have a look at, the bargains, especially the meat department. Sometimes you can see their stuff that's on clearance, and sometimes it'll even be half price. So we always sort of shop there first. And again, being in the supermarket more often, you're more likely to come across those specials. The trick is not filling your cart with all those other things that you don't need to be buying. Another sort of more controversial counterintuitive way of saving money is actually to eat meat. I know that there are a lot of people saying that eating meat is bad for the environment. I personally would argue that herbivores doing what they're designed to do out on the grass, it's worth looking into. They actually sequester carbon. They don't make it bad. It's all the tillage that we do of the ground that is releasing the carbon dioxide into the air. If we let that grass grow, keep that ground covered, keep that carbon in the ground, big herbivores, in particular cattle doing rotational grazing, are a fantastic way of harvesting carbon and getting the plants to put it down into the roots. So Joel Salatin has a lot of information on that. So if you want to look into it, he's done the research. He has the proof on the farm. So if you want to look into it, do. It does mean, of course, that you're buying pasture-raised food to be able to be that way, to be helping the environment in that way. But eating meat and eating fat are very cheap calories. You'll want to stick to more the natural fats and away from the sort of industrial oils, canola oil, soy oil, those sorts of things. But if you can keep towards the naturally occurring fats are a really cheap way of getting calories. And fat and meat will keep you much fuller for much longer. And have you ever compared the price of actual meat to some of the meat substitute products that you might instead buy if you're trying to do a meat-free meal? And you'll probably find that the meat-free options are at least comparable in price, if not more so. And I get it, if you want to do it for ethical reasons or whatever, by all means, no skin off my nose. If you want to be vegetarian, go for it. But especially the vegan way of eating, you'll probably find it will cost you more that way than eating just plain old meat and veg will. For saving some money while you're shopping is to not have a weekly budget, which sounds a little crazy, but if you have a really strict weekly budget for doing your groceries, that means that you don't have that spare cash to buy stuff when it's really on special, and especially if it's stuff you know you're going to use and it's a really good deal. What we try and do is we kind of have a overall monthly sort of budget that we aim for, and some weeks, flour might be really on special, or I don't know, something that we eat lots of might be on special, and so I have the ability and the flexibility to buy as much as that as we can possibly store somewhere safely, and that way I know we're going to use it, but overall over that month we will have saved money. So having a more flexible budget, I guess, is the way. We're really conscious of making sure we're buying the the store brand off-label varieties of a lot of things. I'm not splurging on stuff. We're really careful to only buy stuff that we need and stuff we'll use, and try and avoid stuff in packets as much as possible, because often that's the stuff that is on special, is the cheap commodity foods that they can package up and make a lot of money off. So we're trying to avoid those things. But if there are bulk deals of something, I know that I can either go home and cook, can, freeze, or it's packets of stuff, non-perishable things that will keep. I'll go crazy and buy up a storm. For example, there was chicken thigh meat the other day on clearance in the meat department, and I think I bought 8 trays, because it was only $2.50 a kilo. So I bought all the stuff there that I knew I could take home and put in the freezer, because we eat a lot of chicken, and for us that was an affordable meal idea, and I knew I had the flexibility within the budget to be able to buy all that, and it means I can buy less meat in the coming week. Next step, controversial tips: don't stick to the list. I know, because same reason really. If you have a list and it's exactly what you need for your perfectly formed meal plan, then sure, it might work out for you. But if you can have a more flexible meal plan and a more flexible shopping list, you can make better use of the specials. It does mean that you have to put a little bit more thought into what meals you're going to be making. But if you're trying to buy along a theme, or you're cooking along a theme for the night, then it does make it a little easier. But again, it means that you can buy, not sticking to the list means that you can buy those things that are on special that you can use later. And another tip: don't shop online if you can avoid it. Being there in person means that you can actually see the fruit and vegetables that you're getting, and especially things that you're buying per bunch or per piece. So it might have a picture of a really beautiful looking capsicum or pepper on the website, and then when you get it, it's a tiny little thing. They're often really good at selecting ones that aren't wrinkly, gross and rotten, but you might pay for it by size. Whereas if you're there in person, you can see, what size it is that you're paying for, and sure, you might not mind spending $2 on a really big piece of whatever. The moth just tried to fly up my nose. But if they're quarter that size, you might not have decided to actually buy that thing. So, yeah, it works for some people, but if it's not working for you, if you're not there in person to substitute it or to decide not to get it, then it's a little more difficult. And my final tip would be learn to grow your own food. And I have a great book. I will cut in a wee bit sort of here-ish, showing you the book that I have put together, showing you exactly what you need to grow your own food. It takes you step by step through every month what you need to plant, what zone you live in, teaches you a lot along the way of setting up your own garden, what you need to put into it, and all those sorts of things. So I've got a few copies here, so I'll show you the physical book. Hopefully I can put in an overlay or something. I hope you found this video really useful. If you have, hit the like button, consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food and other homesteading bits and pieces. We'll see you in the next one.